Welcome, folks. We got a special episode coming up today. We've got Jen and Tom on the podcast, and I absolutely had to get them on as soon as I was tracking them and their foundation. So, guys, welcome to the podcast. Welcome, Tom. Welcome, Jen. Tom, let's start with you. You've got a pretty, I don't even want to get into your backstory and your history just because it's so badass and cool. And Jen, we'll get to you right after that as well, and how you managed to find this guy on, see him on your radar, because you've got a cool story as well. So, Tom, welcome to the podcast. And let's start with, man, like, what's your backstory? Because I think it's pretty awesome. I think people are really going to enjoy it.
Thanks for having us on. Truly appreciate it. My backstory, in a flash, my backstory is basically I was that guy that grew up in Indiana with no plans in life, right? High school, I had zero plans like most kids. You know, I'm going to be a fireman, a cop or something. I don't know. I didn't have any clue. And I was building houses, and a friend of mine joined the military. That was his only path, I guess, and he joined the military. When he came back from basic training, we were on our way to a John Cougar concert, and he was telling me how cool it was. You know, oh, the basic training is really cool, and the haircut's not so bad, and I'm going to Germany. And I thought, man, what a good way to get out of Indiana, right? What a good way to get out of this little Hoosier town, paid for. So I joined the military that night.
John Cougar should get a kickback.
Yeah, John Cougar should get a kickback. Yeah, I literally.
I should clarify for all those like Gen Zs and like younger millennials. That's John Cougar Mellencamp, epic songwriter and performer from the 1980s. I remember him very well. So we just have to clarify that. And Tom, when was this? Is this in the 80s? Is this in the 90s?
Yeah,
it was
straight up 86.
1985.
1985.
Yeah,
Think
I think
Pink
Little
Houses.
Pink Houses or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget how old I am, and I have to tell people who John Cougar is sometimes. He's been disappeared for a bit.
Yeah, your grandma used to yell about the Mellencamp boy because he lived behind
us.
the
Seymour, Indiana. My grandma would yell about that noisy Mellencamp kid making all that racket in the back. So that was kind of a good time. But yeah, I joined the Army just with, I'm going to get some college money. You know, I'll get out, I'll go back to college and finish it and do it right and not steal all my parents' money and waste it. And when I got to Germany, I mean, I was introduced to French Commando School, German Ranger School. We went to the Swiss March, platoon competence training, which was taught by Green Berets in Germany. And I thought, this is different than I had been experiencing the regular Army, sit in the motor pool, change the oil, never drive the vehicle. It's always broke kind of thing. And a friend of mine had a picture of his dad holding him as a baby wearing his dad's Green Beret. And he said, I'm going to be a Green Beret. This is my dream. And I thought, well, I adopted that dream myself because it looked cool. And I didn't really have one at the time. So I took his. And I made my way to Fort Bragg, jump
Maybe
school.
You shared in his.
Yeah, I shared in his. But I made my way to Fort Bragg and made the jump school, made the Q course. And while I was in language school, a couple guys approached me and said, hey, we were in the Q course with you, the Special Forces Qualification course, and we think you have what it takes to go to Delta Force. I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. What's that? I'm like, oh, well, don't worry about it. Just call this phone number. Some guy will come out and give you a PT test and a psych test and then, you know, determine whether you can go to selection or not. And so I called that number while I was in language school, and they did. And I got a selection date, and I packed up and moved to Fort Campbell, Kentucky in 5th Special Forces Group, and they were all deployed to the first Gulf War. There wasn't anybody there except me and a couple other guys who were injured. And I was non-deployable because I had a selection date for the unit. So I missed out on that war. And everybody returned back and asked me, who's the new guy? I'm like, don't worry about it. I'm going back to Fort Bragg. And so I went back to Fort Bragg in 1980. Oh, I was 1990. Went back to Fort Bragg. I left Fort Bragg in 89, 90. And I got back to Fort Bragg early 91, about 4 months later, and stayed there for 25 more years. And that's when I made the unit, and just that was the start of everything. Everything amazing and everything horrible. I'd say that was the start of everything amazing and horrible in my life at one time.
The yin and the yang.
All at once.
Wow. Okay, so, yeah, I mean, being a Canadian, growing up in the 80s, my perspective was Top Gun, Hulk Hogan, and Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, like, I had this whole, like, idea. I was like, man, I love like G.I. Joe. Like that was my thing. But I wasn't really tracking Delta until the video game came out on PC in like, I think it was the 90s. I was like, oh, what's this? And I'm curious because I don't know much about it because it's a very secretive unit until I saw Black Hawk Down, which we'll get into eventually. So how do they select? Like, you're in the Green Berets. Is it a unit that is brought together by all the different tier 1 units? How do they go about saying, hey, do you want to try out for this incredible like tier 1 unit? What's that about? Like, how do they get people in?
You know, what's unique about the unit is anybody can go. Anybody can try out. You have to have so many years in the military. You have to be on your second enlistment, and you have to be of a certain rank, whether you're enlisted or officer, in between certain ranks. So they want you young, but not too young. They don't want you too old, and they want you within a certain rank. But they'll take anybody that has a headquarters at JSOC. So everybody, Marines, Army, Air Force, and everyone has an office in JSOC, so everyone can try out. And so then you have the initial assessment of the psychological evaluation and the initial PT test. If you can't even make that, right, then there's no wasted time on you. After that, once you make that, you go to selection. And they're looking for, like if you think of a Green Beret, they're looking for an individual who can operate as a team on a team individually. But in the unit, they're looking for individuals who can operate individually on a team. So the selections are quite different. I went to both, sadly, and SF selection is more of a team sport kind of individual. It's an individual event, but you're doing it as a team. So if one individual drops out on that team, it makes it harder for everyone else up to a certain point. Like if you're pushing a car with only 3 tires on it, and you've got 8 guys and 2 drop out because they quit. Okay, now you have 6 guys to do the same job. And so the anger kind of rises a bit. And you're not allowed to encourage or discourage people as well. So you can't scream at people for not trying. But unit selection is more of a total individual event to where you make all the decisions. You're responsible for all the things you do right and wrong. And you learn that. You learn that in the mountains of West Virginia. You learn that it's all you and that you can't blame anybody else. And they're looking for those individuals that can operate alone, make proper decisions, and operate through adversity and struggle and not quit. I mean, actually never quit, even though it's in your head the whole time. The final event is a 40-mile march after you've spent already a couple of weeks up there hiking every day with your rucksack. Your rucksack gets heavier every other day. And that final day, I mean, your rucksack's probably minimum 100 pounds. I mean, I don't know. It's pretty heavy. And you can't count the food or water that you always need to have in there. And it's just wearing you down that 40-mile hike up and down the mountains. And I don't know how many times I wanted to quit, right? Now, I'm going to quit the next time I see a truck. I'm getting on a truck or this or that. Anytime I see a human, I'm going to quit. And it just never happened. I just kept going and going. And so they look for those people who just won't quit, but can still operate, like I said, through that adversity and make those decisions as an individual. Because you'll find yourself during your career, though you're typically always on a team, you're operating by yourself and you're making those decisions by yourself, those top level decisions that could get a lot of people fired, starting with yourself. And they want to see who can handle that stress, I think, and take that on.
Right on. Yeah. It sounds, you're glossing over how hard this training really is. And for any civilian that's tuning in, when Tom says hard, it's probably orders of magnitude greater than your hard and my hard. So I can only imagine how grueling that likely was. And the mindset of just not giving up is critical. So Jen, how did you end up meeting a guy like Tom that's clearly very active in the military community, deploying? I'm always curious because I have a different experience. I was a reservist, so I was always home, and I met my wife on pre-deployment, but I didn't have to stay on base all the time. I kind of had like a foot in the civilian world, foot in the military world. And so it was a bit easier to maintain a relationship. But for you, obviously, that must have been a really, really different story. Were you military? How did you guys end up meeting, and how did you end up creating such an awesome foundation?
We actually met. Tom was retired about 6 months when we met, but really he had been out for about 2.5 years. And I say retired because soon as he left Delta Force, he immediately went to Jordan and spent almost 2 years setting up a special operations, training and selection.
I was running a qualification course for Jordanian forces to be qualified as Green Berets. Prince Hashem and King Abdullah II wanted to start up a special forces program like the United States. So what I started up was a 4-month program, not a 6-month program, teaching all of the skills minus the medical, the heavy medical. You know, obviously you're not going to get that in 4 months. But everything else was taught: the commo, the weapons, the engineering stuff, and the teamwork. So that was a good 2 years of running a special operations training.
And you really, I mean, he was working with other Green Berets, other Delta Force guys, doing, you know, not the same stuff, but close enough stuff. So I don't think his retirement hit him until he came back. That job had dried up. He started contracting and, you know, was just in a really bad mental health space when I met him. I was a photographer and filmmaker, and I was hired to work alongside special operations, essentially as combat camera, but on stateside missions. So I would work with Tom. I lived in St. Louis. He lived still in North Carolina at the time. So we had a long distance relationship for about 2.5 years. And most of the time that we saw each other, frankly, was work. You know, I would embed with the SEALs for 3 weeks with Tom, or I would embed with the Green Berets for 2 weeks with Tom. So we really met as colleagues, friends, and developed a relationship. But I've only known him in his work environment, truly. And people always ask, how is it to work with your husband? And it's all I've known since I met him 9 years ago, is working alongside of him. So
that's really cool. That's really cool. So the relationship was born out of work, and you've just continued what's working, no pun intended, throughout all those years and created the foundation. So let's go there. Like, Jen, I'll ask you, and then we'll flip it over to Tom. You guys created your own foundation. So you have the All Secure Foundation. How did that get started? And that's what originally caught my eye, was this foundation. So where did that get started at?
So when I was working alongside Tom, again, I was working in special operation units for about 3.5, 4 years. And I just started asking the guys. I just started saying, hey, like, where do you need help? Because I was helping in some very small capacity to help them prepare for war and go over and fight a war. And I would see these teams come back, sometimes the 3rd or 4th iteration. And it wasn't just that people weren't coming back. That's hard enough. But to see people that you knew 2 or 3 years before, and they're 28 years old and they look 40, and they just are so incredibly stressed out. They're going through their second divorce. And I learned about the suicide epidemic at that time, which honestly I thought was not true. I didn't think it was accurate, and it actually isn't accurate. It's much higher than 22 a day. It's probably closer to 38 a day. And when I learned about that, and Tom was losing friends left and right to suicide, and I wasn't seeing people die of combat. I was seeing, you know, hey, Jim died. Hey, Bob died. Hey, Nick died. You know, what happened? It was suicide, suicide, suicide. And I said, listen, somebody's got to help these soldiers come home. You know, millions and billions of dollars to get them over there. And then I started asking them, how are you trained to deal with what you just did or saw? And everyone said, we don't do that. And I said, well, you have to do that. You have to train how to come back. And so we started All Secure Foundation, really born from our struggle as a couple, Tom's struggle with PTS, my struggle with PTS from a different source. And how can we as a couple fight this thing instead of me being against the Army, which is what you hear so much from spouses is, I hate this thing that takes my husband or wife away. I hate this thing that, you know, robs us of time together as a family. And there's a lot of resentment, and that just tears apart relationships because, you know, you've got this sailor or soldier that's like, I've always wanted to do this my whole life. This is what I'm built to do. This is what I want to do. And I feel completely and utterly torn between my family and this service. And so what we wanted to do is, hey, let's define the enemy as the enemy, which is who you're fighting. And you guys can fight that together as a unified front. instead of fighting against each other. And the same thing with PTS. You can join together to fight it together versus trying to attack this thing individually. And there's far more success when the entire family is healing together than just one individual. So really All Secure was born of just talking to the guys, finding out where they needed help. And
well, there was magic. There was magic in her being on target, her being a female, right? And her being cute. And that, like the light, here come the bugs, right? On target guys all the time. They're going to come over here. And they would kind of crowd around her and I, and then she would talk and we would talk, and then she would ask questions. So she got on the inside of where people don't get, right? These guys started opening up, with me opening up, standing there, and then her being there and then opening up and her offering a different perspective. She got to see the inside that most people don't get to see, and they got to see something from the outside that they would have never gotten to see before. And so they liked it and they wanted more of it. And then it just kind of grew like, wow, who's this civilian that knows these things, or that just cares about us and listens? And then, oh, by the way, she knows somebody that I can talk to that knows more, that can help me. And oh, by the way, wow, I feel better. And then it just grew from there to where, had she not gotten on the inside like that, we would have kept her away like we do everyone else, like we had always done. We're fine on the inside here. Nobody's inside our bubble. She got inside that bubble and popped it from the inside and exposed all of us for the shit that we were and the lies that we were telling about how healthy we were, and started calling us on our shit. And we all started getting better and liked it. So people were really interested in what she was doing, which was just kind of listening and loving, and being honest to that hard mom. Like, you're not eating out of a gas station. Stop eating out of a gas station. When we'd pull up to eat, she's like, no, we're going to go eat healthy food over here. And so we started eating healthy again. We started feeling better. We realized, oh, this stuff works a little bit.
That's so Jim, like before this got started, did you have any experience in that world of improving mental health? Or was this kind of like, I need to figure this out and do some training and get myself up to speed so I can help these guys out?
Yes, no, and yes. So I had no training. My nickname was the counselor in high school because I'm just a huge empath, and I think it's just fallen.
Real quick, her training was growing up in a hard life.
Yeah, that too.
Raised hard, learned different, learned how to love differently, and like, I won't raise this way. So I think that was her training, was living it growing up.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think when you're raised in an abusive household, it does rewrite you. And when you're a child, you don't understand it. It's very difficult to comprehend that the person who's supposed to be your protector, the person who is supposed to love you unconditionally at a very young age, you develop thinking, I'm unworthy, I'm not lovable. What's wrong with me? Why do other kids have the Cosby life? Talk about the 80s. Growing up in that very idealistic TV kind of time frame of, family ties. And
out of the water,
well, a lot of them blew it out of the water. But, what you see on a Thursday night on NBC, when you're 6 years old.
Right?
Sure. And so I think I did not have formal training, but I started therapy at 14. In high school, like I said, that the joke was that I was the counselor just because people would naturally come to me and start talking to me. So I think it's part of who I am, part of my personality type. But once I started meeting Tom, and honestly, the guys started saying things like, I'd prefer to be overseas than at home, or I'm more comfortable in a combat zone than I am with a 4-year-old. Or, I've got the guy to my left and right that can help me in a time of war, and I feel comfortable. But when I get home, I'm all alone. And I walk in that door and I have no clue what to do. And I end up screwing it up in the first 30 minutes. And then I'll screw it up again 2 hours after that. And again the next day. So it's better for them that I'm not here. And I want to be here. I just don't know how to be here. And we realize nobody, people will tell Tom all the time, I'm trained for this. And what do you tell them?
I bring the realization that they weren't trained for what they think they were trained for. They were trained to shoot, move, communicate, medicate, seize property, take a life, hold ground. And I said, well, when were you trained to deal with what that does to you, right? The loss of life, the stress, the constantly being gone from your family. Have you been trained on that? And they're like, oh, well, no. You have been trained to go to war, of course. No one's trained you to come home from war, and that's what we're doing. So it's a realization to people that, oh, well, I've been trained for what? Okay, let's admit that I haven't been trained to do this. So let's learn something. They don't really need help. They just need training in something they haven't been trained on yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not that hard to get the information. I went to health coaching school because I thought I needed a certification to help. Like I really was like, okay, I want to help people. I must get certified in something to do this work. I need a diploma or something. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. So I am certified, but
honestly,
matter.
the lighthouses, we don't do the therapy. We share our stories. We have licensed clinical social workers.
Yes, as our coaches.
Do our coaching and help, but we share our story. We're the lighthouse, journeyman, whatever it is. We're also on this journey of healing as well. So we invite everyone to come along with us.
Yeah, that was the analogy that really stood out to me when you guys mentioned that you were the lighthouse. And Tom, I want to flip it back to you. I watched the mini documentary that Fox did about you, which was just incredibly powerful. So, Jen mentioned, she had to do something. She got qualified, but she was in there. She, was born out of necessity. In your case, obviously, you had to deal with a bunch of stuff coming home, and you said you weren't trained to do this kind of stuff. What was it about your service that really, got you to that kind of breaking point? And at one point, you said something in that documentary when you were in Mogadishu, and you said the off switch went to, off, if you want to call it that way. But what was that, and what then allowed you to kind of get to the point where you're like, okay, I need help and I need to sort this out like right away?
It's a long time between the start and getting help, sadly. That was, I think that moment that I realized that I was going to die, that nothing mattered. I think I became violent, aggressive that night for sure. And then obviously the spoiler alert is I didn't die that night, but my feelings stayed the same. I lost empathy and compassion, and it just didn't return. And what I did was I used it as a tool to train harder so that day would never happen again. And I think I covered up my emotions more so I would never feel that way again. And then over the years, that became who I was. I played that game for so many years that even though I wasn't in a violent combat situation for many, many years after Somalia, I was mentally in that state, living in it, not letting it go, and training harder and harder so that day would never happen again. That it became my habit, my muscle memory to behave that way and to act that way. So I just continued to act that way. And if you'd asked me 10 years after Somalia why I act that way, I would have told you that's what warriors act like. I had no real reason other than that's what we do. Well, shut up. I'm gonna go do something else now. I didn't care. I didn't care about people. I didn't care about myself, so I couldn't care about people. And the day that I tried to start caring about people was honestly our wedding night. I thought that before I tried, but really that was just words. Those words that keep people around. Oh, I'll try. I'll get better. I'll do something. And then they stay around, hoping that, what you're saying is true, which always works out in relationships for a short time, right? You can fool somebody for a short time, but then the real you pops out. I think the wedding night, I'd already popped out before, but our wedding night, I think, was one of those wake ups for Jen to where the ultimatum was laid down to me the next morning when I woke up in the hotel room, like, oh, shit. That didn't go well. That wasn't a wedding night that, you want to write about. Though I didn't remember it. I knew that Jen had the paperwork in her hand sitting on the bed saying, we haven't turned this in yet. We got married on the beach on Friday. We have to turn this in Monday to make it official. So really, we're not married in the state's eyes, So I don't have to turn this in. And we got some stuff to think about and work on here. And that's when that was the day of everything I had ever done wrong that just came crashing down on me again. And instead of making a promise, I made a comment or a statement that was reality, that I will get help on Monday. I mean, I will start Monday, wherever the hell that was, and I wouldn't stop. And I started that Monday, and it's been a journey since. But I'd say the wedding night was the night that I realized, man, I can't handle this myself. I've been lying to myself for years that I could do it myself. All I needed to do was stop doing what I was doing and everything would be better, right?
It's kind of like yelling at an alcoholic, don't drink.
Yeah, stop drinking then. You won't be drunk,
Drinking.
you know?
Right. Just do it right now, tonight. It's over.
Like, it's like the same thing as like, you need to lose weight. Stop eating.
Right.
Why are you eating so much?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I know.
No shit. If I didn't put food in my
Yeah. Thanks, bro.
So I've always had that no shit. Like, no shit, I know what to do. But until I had something in my life that was more powerful than myself, like, you know, like Jen made me change my mind that day. So I've been working nonstop, honestly, with setbacks since that day.
With life since that day, honestly.
To still, you know, I still screw up. I don't screw up 9 times out of 10. I screw up 2 times out of 10, you know? So it's gone the other way, and it's not a habit anymore. It's more noticeable now, versus it's every day. There's Tom again being a jerk, but
and also you and I didn't understand even till recently when we started All Secure, we said healing the invisible wounds of war back in 2013. And that's already been changed to healing war trauma because we know it's an injury. We know that you could see it in the brain. Right. You can do scans. Like, no more do we have to say this is a matter of willpower. You need to man up or shove it under the rug, because, you know, we go around, Tom and I speak at special operation bases around the country, and we'll tell the guys, listen, if you have a broken arm, nobody's telling you to shove it under the rug or just to be a man and will your broken arm
work through that
to be healed. You go to a doctor, they set it, they put a cast on it, and then you heal from it through
you're given time off of duty to properly heal.
It's like, why aren't we doing that for an injury in your brain? I mean, you could see it in a scan. It's no longer woo woo or this or that. It's just as real. It's just as healable as a broken arm.
So, Jen, I just want to comment on that. You can see it in the brain. This is new to me. What do you actually see on a scan? Is it a CT scan? What type of scan are you doing? And what are they picking out on those scans now? It's
amazing. So we knew that there was neurological damage and the amygdala in certain areas were severely affected by PTS. Tom and I last summer had the Stellar Ganglion Block Shot, or SGB, which is a shot that takes the fight, flight, or freeze, and it just gives you a pause from it. So it's not like getting rid of PTS. What it's doing is telling that fight, flight, or freeze. For me, it's freeze. For him, it's fight. It's just telling that nervous system to calm down. And it gives you a break to get more deep into some deeper kind of healing work. So we had that shot done in Chicago. The Amen Clinic, Dr. Amen, anyone listens should be following him. He's amazing and pretty funny. But we had our brain scanned there, massive CT scans, MRIs, everything. They looked a whole...
I don't know the exact name of it, but it's an interactive scan that they give you while you're operating on a computer. And you're trying to answer questions really fast, and you're screwing it up. So you're getting mad. You're like, "Oh, I got this one," and then boom, they screw it, and your brain starts to fire. Like, you're getting
all
mad
fired up.
Take this test. You want to get it right, but they screw it. So they're just getting
concentration,
angry, and then you go take an MRI. And
Okay.
He called me, this doctor that didn't know I was military, didn't know anything about me other than what he read on my chart, probably my age and stuff. Said, I'm looking at your brain, and I do a lot of work with pro football players, and we've healed them. He goes, what I see in your brain here is, let me ask you something. Do you go from 0 to like 100? From like, I'm okay to rage, not mad, but rage?
Not even anger. You skip anger.
I go, oh, yeah, for sure. He goes, you had problems sleeping, not like you just do this and this, but you can't go to sleep, and when you wake up, you can't go back to sleep. Yeah. Do you have this and this? Do you
say things that...
Do you say things to people you love that you wish you could take back, and you don't mean them, and you're saying the most hurtful of things? I go, I can say the most rudest things to people in a second. Once I know you, I can assess what will bother you the most and turn around and use that against you. I mean, if I'm in one of those things, I go, oh, yeah, I do that way too much. She goes, yeah, okay, so here's the deal with your brain over here. This part in the scan should be red, it's white. This part should be blue, it's red. We can give you some pills here. None of them are prescription. I got them all on Amazon. And then hyperbaric chamber for a tent. He goes, we can get that all back to normal.
And he was showing like NFL player brains who were like Tom's brain and saying, oh, look, like here's a totally damaged brain, just like yours. This guy's in the NFL for 15 years and he's been concussed a zillion times. Oh, and he has childhood trauma. So he has PTSD, which looks very different in the brain. It's more complicated. And our operators don't even, it's the one thing I keep asking, like, if you can get a brain scan, go get a brain scan, go get a brain scan, because once these guys and gals are getting them, I had my brain scan too. So I don't have combat PTS, but I have secondary trauma from our relationship. And I also have complex PTS from childhood. Some of those injuries look the same. So it's just proving like it doesn't matter if it comes from combat or a car wreck or anything. Like trauma is trauma, and the way the body responds to that injury is physical, and you can physically see that injury and you can heal it. And that's the important thing, is this isn't a life sentence. Will Tom have memories of war for the rest of his life? Of course. Is he going to have to still deal with moments of grief, loss, horror? Yes, he will. But how he responds to those triggers and how he reacts to those memories can be totally different than the destructive patterns he was using, trying to erase or forget or make it go away, and then frustrated that he couldn't, because it's just not logical.
And for everybody that's out there listening and they're leaning in, waiting to say, that's bullshit, that's crap, blah, blah, blah. Think about it. Have you gone to school to study that, to say that's crap, right? So we find new things all the time. People are like, that's horse shit. That's this. That doesn't work. That's magic. Yeah, we used to think things were magic back before we proved them too, right? So now that we know that you can scan your brain, just like you can x-ray your arm and see a broken bone, you can determine what can fix your brain and what can connect those pathways and make you stop saying those things that we say that everybody I talk to admits. Stop the aggressive behavior that everybody I talk to admits. Stop the suicidal ideation that everybody I talk to admits. Stop to the let's just get a divorce because it's easier than working on our problems, which everyone I talk to admits to, because we defer to the easy path. Why refute that? You got these commandos out there that live on that moniker. I'm a commando. I'm a badass. Nothing affects me, right?
Then you're not
You're
human.
A biological entity that operates the same way as this biological entity, and this one operates. It's the exact same thing, pretty much affects us all, and especially emotions. And when we operate and make decisions out of our emotions, we're making bad decisions, because emotions don't have any, logic with them. They're emotions.
Right.
And when we're hijacked,
right. And it's up to us to react to.
Yeah.
It's not up to us to not have the emotional response. It's up to us to decide what to do with that emotion. But if your brain is not firing on all cylinders due to PTS, that's where we
bad decisions.
Because we don't have the awareness and we don't have the bad decisions. The 0 to 100, just sitting and all of a sudden like just having a rage flare up, and it's like, but I don't understand why I'm having a rage flare up. Why am I angry right now? And then you get frustrated, and then for me it's a downward spiral of shit. Like, oh, I'm a loser. I shouldn't be feeling this way. And then I get down on myself, and then it just it spirals until I got the awareness, like, hey, whoa, I'm just having a moment. I know what to do now. Cool. But I didn't know about the actual physiology that can be shown on a scan, which is really cool. We're actually working with Concussion Legacy Foundation. I don't know if you're tracking who they are. They started out with the NFL and now have been branching into the troops, essentially, to look at the brain from another aspect with, the CTE and concussions and stuff like that, which they're doing brain scans and stuff. So I think there's some dovetailing happening here where we're going to get a much better picture as to what PTS looks like, and to make sure that everybody understands, like, hey man, this is not just some nebulous type affliction you have. This is an actual injury. We can fix it. Like, let's get after it. So Tom, I want to just touch back on your service. When you were in Mogadishu, was this you were a kid, I guess, right? Was this your first exposure to real combat? And it's like the worst. Like, I mean, for me, the movie kind of gave like the context, like, holy shit, like this is bad. But I can only imagine what it was like on the ground. And if that's your first experience, I mean, I can only imagine, especially if you're a kid, that must have just been like way too much, right?
I was changing my mind right away. But
you're 26.
You can't go anywhere. I was 26, 23 when I got there. And, well, 23. So yeah, 23, just over 23. So 2 years later, I was in Somalia, 2 years in the unit. And in those 2 years, I mean, I'd been in the Army 3 years, really, regular Army mechanized engineer. So, you know, I'm not doing a lot of infantry stuff. And then I was in schools, right? I was in the Q course, and I was in selections, and I was in this and that. And then I made the unit, and then I was in training for the unit. And then boom, 2 years after I start, I'm in Somalia. And that's the very first combat, first combat I'd ever seen. And a lot of those guys had been in Rangers or SF before. I came from, I was at 12 Bravo. I went through SF, but through the school. I wasn't in SF. So I never deployed. I wasn't in combat. I wasn't in Panama. I wasn't in Grenada. I wasn't in those places that some of the guys that were there had been in before. That was my very first combat. And I know I was leaning on a lot of the other guys, but they had never seen combat like that, right? That's not what we were designed. We were in and out, in and out. When you get pinned down for 18 hours and you're such a small element, I mean, typically you lose. I mean, typically those odds you lose. Thank goodness for the 160th and the Little Birds that were nonstop that night to keep the hordes of people away. It's like those zombie movies. You just on the screen, you see them, thousands of zombies just shooting at them, and they just keep coming. It's terrifying. So I remember, I mean, I'm a grown man now, and I'm not afraid to say that it was terrifying. A lot of guys won't say that. Oh, so I just did my job. No, I was terrified. You know, thought I was going to die. Of course, I'm terrified. And I don't even want to get shot. And I'm watching guys get shot. This guy's heel was blown off. I'm working on. This guy was shot in the back of the butt, and his testicles were shot off. I'm working on this guy, and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm not even the medic. You know, it's just he's across the street trying to save another life. And meanwhile, people are fighting to keep people back while you're doing this. And it's 18 hours into it. Well, 18 hours later, but halfway through it, I'm thinking, wow, this, okay. You know, 1 hour I get, 2 hours, 3, 9 hours later, I'm like, are we going home anytime soon? And my team leader's like, I don't know. You know, I don't know. And he took off and went the other way. And I'm thinking, wow, I don't like this at all. And it was one of those where I just cracked down. I'm like, okay, I hate everybody. I hate everything, and everything needs to die. That way we'll live. But it was certainly something you can never prepare for in training. You can't imagine what you think you'll do. You can't imagine what it feels like. You can't imagine the fear. I know a lot of people, I know it's scary. No, you don't. Unless you thought you were going to die and people were coming and you couldn't stop them, you don't know the fear of that. And if anyone tries to say I wasn't scared, I'll just laugh. All right, what's wrong with you then? I mean, if you weren't afraid of that, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you jump up and take off and run out and start shooting people? I don't know, because people don't want to die, especially a group of people who are used to getting what they want when they want it and being in charge and control and dominant. I mean, we had plastic helmets, skateboard helmets, man. I mean, the next morning we had some shipped in from the UK, some Kevlar helmets for sure. But that was the thought process, in and out, in and out, in and out. What could go wrong? What can happen? And it's a good lesson, I think, that we needed to learn. Sadly, we had to learn that lesson, you know, to maybe save and change some lives down the road. I don't know.
There were so many lessons in that, even for us as viewers or people that, like I told Tom before, I said, Gary Gordon and Randy Shugart, who are the Medal of Honor recipients from that day, I said, was so remarkable is they looked down from that helicopter. They knew they had a man who was in need. He was going to be killed. And they fully knew the odds were against them. And 3 times they had to be asked, at least, right, to be put on the ground. And I told Tom, I said, all of you were in that place of sacrifice for each other, that you would have died for each other. But as a civilian, to watch that, there's times I've told Tom, I'm like, I don't know that I would have asked 3 times to go down into a swarm of people, knowing that probably would be the last thing I did. So the heroics of that, I think a lot of people will say that there's an absence of love in war, and I disagree. I think there's a tremendous amount of love in war, and Gary and Randy showed us all that day too, that type of love. So I think there are horrific lessons and also ones that just I feel like go beyond human. It's just sad and beautiful.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, having deployed myself and having come back and, not being anywhere near the same level of combat that you've experienced, there's still an element of, okay, I've done something I think most people haven't done. Do I feel normal? Am I all right? And kind of doing this like self-assessment. And one thing that I noticed was that because the country wasn't really at war. And this is a question I'll throw your way, Tom. Like, you did something that was, very, very important for the country. It was traumatic. But at the end of the day, like, you are a super secretive unit. You're coming home. There is not like a World War II ticker tape parade for you. What does that do to you? Like, do you think it had an impact on you and your buddies having come home and not really had that kind of communal, like, hey, thanks for doing all this like amazing work for us, and only kind of seeing it later on down the road? Do you think that that's an important component that we're kind of missing when we have these wars, these flare-ups where we have, specialized units, small contingencies of the army or whatever element going over and then coming back and kind of being like, all right, thanks guys, really appreciate it. Here's, tea and medals, and then, okay, carry on. Do you think there's a component there that we're kind of missing where the country or the civilian population doesn't really get around us because it's too small? And I wonder if you can comment on that.
Yeah, we came home. We landed in another town just to keep it quiet. We got on a bus and drove to work from a 2-hour ride. And then I was picked up by my spouse at the time, and that was it. Never said a word. I remember driving home, 25-minute drive, got to the house. We went inside, and I set my bag down and turned. My wife at the time was like, so how was it? I go, and I just started bawling. No words. The shrink had said something about it too. And I laughed at him like, ha ha ha. He's like, hey, when you guys go home now, something might happen. You might be overwhelmed. Somebody might just trigger you. And I'm like, what are you talking about, you foolish man? Exactly as he said. I went home, didn't say a word, no fanfare. Next day, we're back at work, cleaning our gear, getting ready for the next thing. I went to one memorial out of everyone that was killed. Everyone was buried, put away, and everything was over before we got back, except for one person. And so you never get the closure. And a lot of guys will tell you, I don't need this. I don't need medals. I don't need that. And, rewarded for this and noticed for that. But as humans that we all are, and when you get past the warrior, we all want to be recognized, right? We all want to feel like what we did was good and someone to clap. And you're like, yeah, okay, it was good. It was liked. Look at the trouble Vietnam veterans had coming home. They were attacked and treated poorly, and they still talk about it to this day. We weren't attacked or treated poorly. We weren't treated anyway. Now, I'm not saying it's just as bad, but I'm saying it's just as big of a problem when you don't recognize it. In the book Tribe by Sebastian Junger, were you thinking about that?
Yeah, it's like it's all about tribe.
Yeah, he talks about it then, back in the days, and how just captured people, escaped Indians, they would return back home, but any say Americans or any white people that were
the frontiersmen
captured
went back to the Indians. They didn't go back
to they stayed in the tribes when they were freed. And when they went to war, they came back and told their story and talked to the people about it once. And then they went back to work. They went back to being part of the community versus being a warrior that used to be part of the community. Now he comes back and he's a warrior and will say, thank you. You're different from us. And you warriors go over there. Never feel part of us again. It's sad. That's what's hurting all of us. To where, hey, when we're done being a warrior, come back home, now contribute to society in a different way. Not a warrior way again, once that's done. And I think people get out and they're like, I hate civilians. I'm going to pack up and move over here because civilians don't get it. Well, they don't get what you do. That's why we did what we do and they do what they do. They do the jobs that we didn't do and we do the jobs that they didn't want to do. We don't hold it against them for not wanting to do what we chose to do. I didn't know what was going to happen to me in the military when I chose it. Nobody does, really. But we might be told what might happen. But as younger people, we're like, sure, I look at the cool shit. It's called recruitment. I don't look at the fact that you might die. Look at all the videos for recruiting. None of them are like dying people and getting wounded and somebody getting drug away with his arm blown off. It's like, buddy, let's go to war. And you never see the bad guy fall. You just see cool tanks and people shooting. And it's like, that's motivation. I'll join that all day. But, show me a clip of people getting blown apart and you screaming for your mom as you die. I don't think I'll join that one. So the awareness of what we've done, and then the awareness of what it does to us.
And then the awareness that, honestly, community matters.
Community, that's what we fought for.
Yep.
Was our community. And now we're mad at our community for what? We're just mad. And when we realize we're just mad, maybe we didn't get patted on the back enough. A lot of guys will say, I don't need an award. I don't need this and that. Sure, you don't need it, but it would make you feel better to get one.
About 10% off, though.
It's the same guy yelling, where's my 10%?
Yeah. So you brought up a good point here, like community matters. You brought up Tribe. The book by Sebastian Junger. I've mentioned it previously on other podcasts, and it's amazing book. And I think you're touching on a really important aspect here. And I'm curious, at the foundation, the your All Secure Foundation, how are you bridging the gap for those individuals that need the help, and then to start getting into and back into the community, with your team of therapists, how does that look for the individuals? Like, okay, I need help. I'm coming to you guys. Day one, what are they doing?
That will depend on how it starts with them. A lot of people want to talk to us for some reason first. And I guess because it's the easy step. Hey, Tom, Jen, you got a moment?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. That moment turns into an hour because they want to tell their story and you want to hear about it. So that's a session, really. So we bring them in and it's like, listen, how about we hand you off to one of our coaches, licensed clinical social workers. They will work with you until you're done. They will assess what you need. And while they're working with you, they will tell our operations what you need, who will resource and research where that's at, which we already have, send that straight to you and where to get money for it or how to pay for it for your insurance or who will pay for it if possible while we're doing the therapy with you.
Yeah.
And we just keep that going 365 days a year along with the retreats that we have. But it's
and sometimes people reach out. We might not be their best first option.
Right.
So we'll do assessments through our licensed clinical social workers. Again, Tom and I aren't doing the assessments, but they're doing the assessments, and they might say, hey, listen, we think it might be better for you to get sober before you do this work. You're still drinking a fifth every night. You're not going to get better drinking a fifth every night. So we're going to recommend this facility or this place. And that might be your best first step. You're going to continue working with us through that process, but everybody's first step doesn't look the same. Just people have different needs. People might have relationship issues like, hey, I'm getting ready to sign the line for divorce. I don't want to get divorced. So we might have to do some more critical work with both parties. So it just kind of depends. You come to us and we treat you like the individual that you are.
And we do the family. We don't do just the veteran or the service member because that's half the problem. Most of it is the spouses don't understand what I'm going through. They don't understand why I'm such an idiot. They don't understand why I do such mean things. If they could understand that it wasn't personally being attacked to them, right, then hopefully that'll change their thought process on what they feel about it. And then they will understand more. They will get help with how they feel and how to deal with that. They start communicating better. They start helping each other. They start fighting together, kind of like turning against the drill sergeant, right? Coming together and turning against that drill sergeant and becoming a team so you can beat the drill sergeant. He's like, aha, now I beat you because I wanted you to become a team, right? That's what we want them to do, is become a team and fight this issue versus fight each other when they really don't know they don't know that they're fighting each other. They're just
and that they're both injured.
Right.
That secondary PTS is a real thing. They used to joke, can you catch it? Yes, actually you can. And, when we look at the suicide statistics of spouses of combat warriors, which is double than the civilian population, up to 17% higher in children of combat warriors, that, this is a family issue. This is not just relegated to the warfighter. So the family has sacrificed. They have given. They are part of this war machine, and they deserve to be healed just the same as the warrior does.
Absolutely. That was actually one of the reasons I decided to go get help. I had a kid and my first child, and things were going badly. And I was like, man, I don't want to pass this on. And I didn't really have a great understanding of it, but I just didn't want to be that angry, aggressive, shitty dad.
Yeah.
It wasn't me. I recognized, I'm like, this isn't me. What's going on? And it was years after I'd left the military. I was like, something's not right. And then it was when I had my son, things started to really flare up. And it was the cocktail of emotions, not sleeping and everything, just kind of bubble all up to the surface. So that's when I made the decision to not pass that on. And that was the line in the sand for me. You mentioned fighting the drill sergeant as like the enemy. I'm pretty sure I read in the synopsis of your foundation that you use emotionally focused therapy. Did I get that?
That's correct.
Did I get that right? So you're using the cycle as the boogeyman or the individual,
yes.
The thing that's not like you. It's not your wife.
Negative cycles. Yes.
I'm a big fan. It basically saved my wife and I's marriage. So we've been doing we have a great therapist who uses that approach, and it's been the best approach for us. And it's just amazing that you guys are using the same approach. So I guess my question is, for somebody that's going through the process of getting better, I mean, maybe Tom, you can speak to this, and Jen, of course, as well. Like, what is it to be? Because you're saying there's an injury, so obviously there's a healing process, and there's a point where you're quote unquote healed. I mean, but just like all injuries, like you break your leg, it's healed, but it's never fully 100%. So do you have a benchmark, or do you have a way to determine, okay, I'm healed to X amount percent and I'm able to carry on and move forward? Is there some way that personally you can identify that? And is there a way that externally you can do that with people that you're working with?
I think for me, it's the time between my freakouts, right? Like, how much time between my last breakdown are we? Because if I have a breakdown, she's obviously on edge for a bit too, right? Oh, here we go again. It's all coming back maybe. So she has emotions that are involved in this more so than I may freak out and then it's over for me. Us military people, we like freak out and then we're done. We're like, what? It's all good now, right? She'll hold on to this a little longer. And then I'll hold on to the feeling of, oh, I'm so sorry, and the shame of saying I'm sorry again, over and over again. There, I did it again, and I got to beat that down so I don't get into my own head.
But I do think you're right. It's like the time between rage.
Yeah.
It's like anger is normal.
Is it months?
Right.
Did you get, when we started, I might get hours out of it.
Yeah.
You didn't yell. You didn't get mad for hours. You haven't been mad for a day. Days turns into you haven't been mad for like 3 weeks, and this is really great. Hey, you haven't freaked out in like 2.5 months, and then it starts to get further and further and further. Now it's not the topic of, hey, you haven't freaked out. It's like you freak out and it's like a weird thing, like, whoa, what's wrong with you? You freaked out, versus here you are freaking out again. When you can get to that, I think you've become a normal human again, to where people fight, right? Couples fight. I mean,
and people get angry. That's normal.
People get angry, and people have stress, and people want to run other people off the road just because they had a bad day too.
Yeah.
And they maybe have never gone through something as violent as that. So emotions are emotions. It's okay. So we all need to learn how to handle our emotions in a proper way, right? We can all do better at that at times. I think that guys like us that can actually take it way too far, and then take the backside of it way too far. Like, I feel so bad about that, I think I'll remove myself from society. As a clean way to break this and not be embarrassed about it again. That's the thought process, is we can get away from that and realize that it's okay to not feel okay. You're normal to have a bad day or two. It's normal. It's not normal to freak out and want to take your life over it. That's an overreaction to what normal people feel. Right. So we worry about that overreaction.
And
you
part
don't
of
need
that
to solve
injury.
this right now by taking your own life. No one cares as much as you think they do about you getting mad, because you haven't done it in 3 or 4 months. You don't do it every day. Stop thinking you're that same monster. You're a different kind of animal now. You're that animal that you're going to freak out every now and then, like others do, but learn those lessons through EFT that we talk about, like when you fight, not if, but when. What are your rules that you follow? Rules. Don't we have law of land warfare when we go to war? Yeah. Well, then you should have rules about how you fight with your spouse.
And then the next follow-up question everybody asks, because seriously, that is the number one thing is how do I fight fair? And people are obsessed with that now. When Tom and I say we have rules for engagement, they're like, what are your rules? I'm like, well, they're not going to work for you because there are rules. But there is a new book called Loving Bravely. We did a podcast with Dr. Solomon, and she lays out those 10 rules. She's like, this is how you fight fair. This is how you develop those rules as a couple. She's got a podcast on it. So Loving Bravely, and Dr. Solomon will help you find those rules because you absolutely should have those. And what Tom do, like neither of us, I think realistic expectations. It needs to be talked about in this community too. Yeah. Like, will Tom never have issues of rage again? I don't expect that. I saw Black Hawk Down, you know, in the 20 years that he did in that same unit after that, you know, Iraq, Afghanistan, all over the world, everything he's done. It's like, I try to explain to friends, like I do live with Jason Bourne. Like I do have that guy. It is that person. So to expect like Jason Bourne to go to the grocery store or to be able to do different things, it's just not the same as the accountant husband you might have. Like there's a difference to the way that this man is. And
we're not saying one's better than the other.
No. And I love who I have.
My husband accountant. So what? I'm like, nobody said anything about that.
Oh, we need accountants.
I'd love to have been an accountant. I can't count. You know, if I'd have been an accountant my whole life, I wouldn't be this screwed up. I mean, it's just maybe,
understanding.
Maybe, right?
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
I can't say that
we've met a lot of accountants pretty screwed up, but
true.
I think it's just if you can have a realistic expectation where your healing can take you, I think that helps so much because I'll have spouses say all the time and warriors, I want to go back to that Indiana boy, or I want to be with a guy I met, you know, when we were in college or when he was just out of this or that. I'm like, you don't have that guy anymore. That guy's gone to war.
Yeah, that's never going to happen again.
So
it's gone. Yeah.
That expectation's unrealistic. And I think starting to develop more realistic expectations helps people so much. What's possible.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, early on when we started talking, you know, we talked about like, we're not trained for this. And it's, you know, part of the reason why I'm in this podcasting game was to heal myself, to talk to really smart people, to get different insights, basically like free therapy.
Yeah, anyway. Heck yeah.
It's lessons.
And you know, it's lessons learned, and they kind of all point to the same direction. Like we've grown up, you know, Americans, Canadians, we have a very similar culture in a lot of ways. We grow up not seeing how to really communicate with each other. Our parents never really learned how to communicate, you know, their emotions with each other. Granted, that's a little bit different because I have, you know, an Italian and French Canadian wife. They over communicate their emotions with each other in a way. But it's true. And that pattern is reflected when you're older, because that's how you learn to be quote unquote a man. That's how you learn to be a woman. You see these interactions and then throw in war and now have all this baggage and trauma, and you just want to get it out, but you don't even have the language. That was the thing that I didn't have. I didn't even have the words to be able to communicate what I was experiencing, full stop. And so if I didn't have the language, how could I even communicate it? I couldn't do like a interpretive dance to explain it. And that's what took the better part of, you know, a few years to kind of figure out like, hey, I want to talk about this. And it was the podcast that was allowing me to just formulate my thoughts a lot better. And that's why I'm so appreciative of people like yourself coming on the podcast to share with all the experiences you guys have had that singular point that like you can get better, but it's the awareness and it's getting through it and working through it. And it's not something you've been trained for. So your expectations need to be, you know, they need to be brought down to a reasonable level, because we've been we've had this idea that we need to be perfect, or we need to be a hard charger, or we need to be an operator, and they're not lining up with reality.
Like tell that perfectionist to ease
bring
up
things a little bit. Right. Yeah. And I can't, like, you know, having never been in that elite level class, let's put it that way, knowing buddies and other individuals I've been on podcasts, like the type A personality seems to be a very typical type of human being in the special forces world. And so when things aren't going right, I can only imagine that doesn't bode well. As for myself, it didn't bode well, but for individuals that have a very, a direct kind of way of approaching things and expecting certain things to go their way because they've always gone their way, I can imagine be very, very off-putting. But Tom, to bring a bit of levity on this conversation, I've always wanted to know, having watched Black Hawk Down, and that was kind of like I guess when I came out early 2000s, I joined in the early 2000s, so I was like, oh wow, cool. But the scene, I got to ask you this scene where the Delta operator throws the grenade into the window, like a Cy Young Award winning pitcher. Did that ever happen?
I don't know. I was talking to a lot of people. They're like, how the movie, did it portray what you saw, And I go, what I saw what I saw. And then when I saw the movie, I saw what other people saw. So that told me a lot about combat that I hadn't thought of before, that you're looking like this through toilet paper holders, and that's all what you see, right? I can be standing next to somebody and I'm looking straight ahead at something terrifying. Somebody standing to my left and right, 3 inches.
You even had conversations
totally different, terrifying.
With guys from Mogadishu
I've had conversations with guys like, where did that happen? Where did that happen? Like, what, right next to you? And I'm like, I didn't see that, So
right.
Yeah, you guys were all in your own little pockets there.
Yeah, and
you threw a grenade.
Movie, right?
I looked at you like, was that you?
Yeah.
You threw a grenade.
I threw a grenade.
That was something we tried to
out of a window. It's true.
that was something that we always tried to emulate, right? When we ever had like training grenades, or when we were doing like stuff in the Abuwa village, we were like, oh, let's get it in, fucking Black Hawk Down. It's freaking impossible.
I was terrified to use grenades. I was trying to use grenades in different ways that was terrifying me. Like, there's an aluminum roof that slopes in where I'm at, and then it drops straight off on the other side. I'm thinking, there's people there. If I could roll a grenade up and it just drop in, I thought, what if I roll it up and it doesn't go hard if it rolls back down? So I'm having these
go all the way. Oh my god!
These feelings like, and then I throw it too hard because I don't want it to ever come back on me. So it's those terrifying decisions you make. Like, should I let this grenade go this close to me? What if it rolls back on me? So lots to think about in combat, more than just chucking grenades at stuff and.
Physics. Lots of physics.
Math.
Grenades roll downhill. So
lots of math.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so for an individual or family that is really interested in getting a hold of you guys and starting to do the work, where do they go, and what's their first step?
Couple first steps, actually. I love recommending Tom's book, All Secure. The reason why is because I think he didn't want to write it. It took me a year to convince him to write it. And really, the day that I said, listen, you and I are on the phone, with 11 people a day. And every person that hears your story goes, oh my God, me too. Oh my God, me too. I didn't realize. I'm like, if you could just write a book and talk about what we talk about on the phone, instead of helping 11 people a day, you can help a whole lot more. And so people read this book and they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize, I feel this way too. I think that awareness piece, like you talked about for you, that light switch that flipped inside of you where you're like, I need to develop a language. There's language in there that helps you figure out what you need to talk about and where you need to go. If they want to come directly to our website, allsecurefoundation.org, we're developing a new site even that's going to have more resources, that will have more areas for help, from podcasts to like you love EFT like we do. So the Gottman Institute, which is amazing, and Sue Johnson. So materials that people can just start clicking things right away, going, oh my gosh, that would help. That would help. If you're in the special operations community, we have licensed clinical social workers that are our coaches. They're phenomenal. That's at no cost to you to come through our system. All you have to do is hit the contact button. It's that easy. We make it really, really simple. Like Tom said, you're not reaching out for help. You just need training in an area you haven't been trained before. So we want to help you with that training process.
She keeps pushing my book, but all I hear is her book's better. Honestly. And it is. Her book has
Jen, you got a book too?
Her book has so many different resources, and it's like a continuation almost of, yes, Tom was screwed up and here's my side of it. But it was one of those that I hear from more people. Hey, I read the book, and I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah, she really did a good job. I'm like, oh, damn, this is for you, babe. And I slide it over, and it's good because it was written. I mean, my book was more of a, how do you get warriors to read this book, and then realize, oh, I read a book that actually fooled me and helps me. It actually helps me. We hid the peas and the brownies. Hers is a quicker read. It's not like a vacation read because you'll end up crying.
No, it's more self-helpy. Yours is more memoir.
It's more of a self-help, like quick and where to go and what to do. And oh, by the way, I hear so many people saying the book is it was written about me. And I go, it was written about me. They're like, no, I know, but it was written about me too. And I go, yeah, all of us, from all of the spouses, because it's so many different stories in there.
Yeah, I think it's our book.
It really helps guys open up. I think people thought it was a girl and a guy book, like Tom and Jen's books are guy and girl books. But I think her book is more of I think the guy should read it as well, because it's awareness of what they're doing to their spouses. And when people read that, they're like, oh, they have to stare at the reality of what they're causing, like looking in a mirror, and they don't like what they see. So they start to change.
Yeah, get to work.
All right. Jen, what's the title of your book?
It's called Arsenal of Hope.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, so I'm definitely going to put those links in. Tom, I'm slowly getting through yours, slowly but surely. I have the attention span for about 15 minutes of reading a night.
Be done with hers by now.
So, but it's great stuff. I'm really impressed with what you put together. Both of you. It's been really cool to read up and watch and learn through everything that you guys are doing. Now, are you guys exclusively for American veterans, or can anybody reach out from any soft community from across the
all over the world? We've had people reach out.
We've helped Canada, New Zealand,
a lot of UK,
Germany, Italy,
New Zealand,
Poland.
Yes. So the answer is yes. We war fighters around the world are the same.
Right, humans.
Same
we
problems.
all feel the same, so we don't want to not help people when we have something that works.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no reason to suffer. There's just no reason for it anymore. We know that there's the light at the end of the tunnel has been shown to us, and all we got to do is walk towards it. I think before it was just really, really dark tunnel where we just thought we were stuck, and now it's like, yeah, you still got to work your way to get to the end of that tunnel, but at least we know there's a pin drop that we can move towards. And you and I are kind of the other side now. We've made it into the light. And like Tom said, yeah, sure, he has setbacks, but they're shorter. We know what to do when they happen, and then they pass.
And I feel better.
Yep.
Right? I feel better.
It's a better life. It's possible for everyone.
That's amazing. It's amazing. I'm glad both of you guys are doing very well. I'm glad you guys have been able to overcome, and you're working through, and you're helping others. And Tom, you've obviously found your next mission in life, which is always hard, for veterans to figure out what the hell to do once you're
right.
Once you're out. And the close, I guess, on the analogy of you guys being the lighthouse, that is definitely what you guys are doing now, and I'm honored to be part of being able to cast that light to a broader audience here in Canada. And I hope a bunch of operators and those that are hurting reach out to you guys and seek out your guidance and your ability to help. So it's been a real pleasure having you guys on. Before we sign off, do you guys have any last words that you want to share with the community?
Yeah. Just last night, Jen asked me, if you were banned from the U.S., what country would you live in forever? And I was like, wow. So, and I thought all around the world where I've been, and I went straight back to Canada.
You did.
I go, Canada. She goes, why? And I go, well, similarity, proximity, people that might want to visit me. It's not as far. But no, I think that people need to realize that it just takes a little bit of self-assessment, a little self-awareness, and it's okay, right? Smile through it, say something nice, even if you don't mean it, right? And watch people change around you.
Yeah, that's what I would say to you.
It's not a very big commando thing to say, but I don't do commando stuff anymore. I don't have to, right? There's other kids that do this shit. So I'd rather smile and say something nice and change people's day. It changes my day, and I know it changes other people's days. So that's what I try to get people to do is just, hey, just smile. People start smiling around you. They can't help it. It's contagious.
I think I would just say for today, take the wording, I can't, and replace it with I won't, just for one day, and see where your priorities lie. So I can't take my wife out on a date night becomes I won't. Can't get on the floor with my kids becomes I won't. And I think you start realizing that you have the power to create whatever life you want. And you can do it. You just got to change your can'ts to won'ts, understand where your priorities lie. And then if you don't like what you see, fix it. Like you said, these are operators. You guys, the smartest, best, capable people on the planet. You can do anything you set your mind towards.
Love it.
That's
Absolutely.
what I got.
I have to agree with that wholeheartedly. We've got the makings of what I've called the veteran renaissance that somebody on the podcast helped me coin last year.
Love it.
And I truly believe that we have the power to influence the next wave, if you want to call it the next greatest generation, with the experiences we've had over the last 20 plus years of fighting war. We just need to be able to unlock that potential through healing and being able to help others in the process. So you guys are doing just that, and it's really beautiful to see. So maybe we'll call you the Happy Commando.
Yeah.
Maybe that could be your next branding initiative.
The Happy Commando.
Get you a shirt with a big smiley face.
I'll dance and stuff.
Please.
I won't take any rates off of that.
Now
That's
I can do
yours.
TikTok
You can take
stuff.
That's my gift.
I can move on to TikTok now.
This is our video.
All right, guys.
Thanks
so much for being awesome guests, and keep me up to date as to any new developments you guys have in your community. And folks, thanks for tuning in. It's always a pleasure. Don't forget, train hard, fight easy. See you on the next one. Peace.